Thank you. So how you guys doing? We're in a third week of a series called Go Within or Go Without. Is anyone ready to quit now, or are you just going to keep going? I don't know if you've noticed, but if you looked at the title for today about really letting go, that for 3 weeks we're just working on one mathematical concept here. You know what that is? Starts with an S. Oh, come on. There's subtraction. Thank you. See, it's so foreign to our understanding that it doesn't just pop up, even though it's a basic mathematical process. But we love addition, don't we? We love the added unto part. You know, more, please bring me more, and then I'll be more, and I'll feel better, and I'll be happy. So the more thing we get, the less, not so much. That's pretty good. The less, not so much. We're very much attuned to the notion that there's something missing from us in some sense, and that if there would be some kind of an acquisition, something that would be added unto us, then we would have the sense of peace. So we would finally feel that we are loved and lovable. Yes? I mean, you don't have to admit it, but, you know, we kind of know we live this as our reality beyond the facade, maybe, that we carry around spirituality, which I'm very good at that. So, trying to unmask myself is the biggest part of my spiritual journey. I was thinking this morning as I was contemplating this message today that, you know, if I just got up in the morning, and you can take this or leave it, if I just got up in the morning and I just made the intention to continually let go of those ways that I show up in the world that I think are making a good face and a good front for the world, if that was my awareness, what I would be doing is I would be becoming obviously vulnerable, which is the danger, that's the peril. But the promise of that would be that I would be revealing more of who I am. And what more accurate definition of spiritual growth, unfoldment, and awakening would there be than being more of who you are? So if, however we do this, however we get familiar with this idea of subtraction, it may lead us to our ultimate goal, which is to reveal, to uncover, and to disclose unabashedly the truth of who we are. To the extent that we can do that is to the extent that we will finally feel that peace that passes human understanding. Because it takes great struggle, it takes great effort, it takes great posturing and positioning and veneering to present ourselves to the world that's less than the real self. Am I true? Are you feeling me on this? Yeah. Okay. So that's all you need for now. Maybe that's all you need for a lifetime. But you know me, I'll go on anyway. A little review, though. So this is our third week. First week, we said, I release my human need. So obviously a subtractive step. And what we said about that is, no, we don't release the idea that we have needs in the world. We're not in denial about our human needs. We understand that we're human and we have physical needs, and yes. But for the purpose of our spiritual work, the purpose of making conscious contact with the divine, with that greater self that is beyond the physical, then it's important for us to let go of those things that seem to be prerequisites to our peace. We're wanting to know that we can go straight to headquarters. There is no intermediary. There is no conditions that need to be met. And this is really going to be very much what today is about, except the way we deal with the recognition of those things. And step 2 was I accept my human condition so I can express my spiritual nature. And again, you know, like I started this idea that could we just accept that we are human beings? You know, there's this notion that we will become more spiritual, we'll become more, you know, we will be vaulting ourselves into the transcendent realm if finally we became better human beings, is a notion that comes out of a separate idea, that there is this perfect, holy God, and then there is these imperfect, you know, people like us who walk around and crawl in the dust, trying to make ourselves into that image and likeness that was the original notion that somehow we have fallen short of, and now we must become oh so purified in order for those doors of heaven to swing open with acceptance. That's not the theology that we believe here. We believe that the gates of heaven are already wide open, and that those gates are within us. And they're accessible to every one of us, no matter where we are on our growth curve. Is that sometimes the hardest notion to accept, that we are already acceptable and perfect in the eyes of the divine? So we accept the human condition so that we don't, again, erect a barrier that would keep us out of the kingdom of God experience. And today, third verse, same as the first, second, I willingly release any part of my human self that is a barrier to God. I willingly release. Willingly release. See, God's not going to take it. See, this is another one of the notions that I had to work with. I didn't have a lot of spiritual training growing up, but I had this sense that, whatever good was going to come was going to be some special dispensation that I was going to get from a God that, finally recognized that I deserved favor. That it wasn't unconditional at all, and I had to be really, really good and worthy to receive anything. And of course, that lives, what is that? That's not a God, that's not God as God is. It's we created that God in our image and likeness, which is, of course, very conditional. And we created a God like we are. So if I can release in some sense these barriers, these things which I erect in my mind, they're not there except because they're thoughts, they're beliefs, they're stories. There's what happens, and then there's what we do with what happens, what we interpret, what that means. If someone is rude to you or someone is critical of you, those are words. Those are simply words. And what we do with them becomes a story. And that story can be an enormous barrier to our experience of accepting ourselves, of loving ourselves, of feeling worthy. And it can lead to all kinds of emotions, of course, of retaliation, of anger, of frustration, of unworthiness. So knowing what a barrier to God would be, what is that? And it's simply said, it's any belief or premise that argues that it is a prerequisite for your peace of mind. Any belief or premise that argues, that says, oh, this is what I need first before I can be peaceful. Does anyone have any of those? We gotta have a rummage sale for those, shouldn't we? Big old garage sale, just dump them all on the table here. Maybe a burning bowl. We should have that more than once a year, perhaps. Lay those down. So it's quiet in here, and I've hit you pretty hard early on, so I'm going to give you a joke, which already has you laughing, so I know that was a good choice. And this really is on point. It's about sometimes how difficult it is for, we get so attached, and we think we're in love with what we believe to be true about ourselves, and clergy are no exception. We sometimes have high degree of we have a high thought about what we think is possible. So here we have a Catholic priest, a Baptist minister, and a rabbi. A Catholic priest and preacher and rabbi are all having this conversation about who has the most potent ministry and ministry acumen. So one day, someone made the comment that preaching to people isn't really all that hard. A real challenge would be to preach to an animal, such as a bear, for example. That would really prove how powerful your preaching is. So one thing led to another, and they decided to do an experiment. And they would all go out into the woods, find a bear, preach to it, and attempt to convert it to their religion. There's no stopping us. 7 days later, they all came together to discuss their experiences. So Father Flannery, who had his arm in a sling, was on crutches and various bandages on his body and his limbs, and he went first. He said, well, he said, I went into the woods to find me a bear. And when I found him, I began to read him from the catechism. Well, that bear wanted nothing to do with me, and he began to slap me around. So I quickly grabbed my holy water, sprinkled it on him, and Holy Mary, Mother of God, he became as gentle as a lamb. The bishop is coming out next week to give him a first communion and confirmation. Reverend Billy Bob, the Baptist, spoke next. He was in a wheelchair, had one arm and both legs in cast, and had an IV drip. In his best fire and brimstone, I jumped into the accent early. In his best fire and brimstone oratory, he exclaimed, "Well, brothers," no, I lost it. "You know, we had those Baptists, we don't sprinkle. I went out and found me a bear. And then I began to read to my bear from God's holy word. But that bear wanted nothing to do with me. So I took hold of him, we began to wrestle. He wrestled down one hill, up another, down another, until we come to a creek. So I quickly dunked him and baptized his hairy soul. Just like you said, he became as gentle as a lamb. We went and spent the rest of the day praising Jesus. Hallelujah." The priest and the reverend looked down at the rabbi, who was lying in a hospital bed. He was in a body cast and traction with IVs and monitors running in and out of him. He was in really bad shape. The rabbi looked up and said, "Looking back on it, circumcision may not have been the best way to start." So we are talking about detachment today. That wasn't in the script, but I can never resist the low-hanging fruit that it is. So let me move on to something spiritual. We get the notion, though, that it is sometimes ridiculously and maybe even comical how we will hold on to things that obviously are not to our best interest and obviously are standing in the way of our growth and unfoldment, but it's so hard because, we just have these very tenacious minds and egos. And I remember I was at a 12-step open speaker meeting, and this very funny speaker was sharing this idea that he said, sometimes newcomers to recovery are kind of like a person who is riding a horse in the parking lot of where the recovery meeting is going on, and they lose their balance on the saddle and they fall off, and they're holding on with one hand and they're being dragged across the pavement, and they're trying to grab literature about how to recover, and people are yelling, "Let go, let go, let go." I'm old enough to remember this book. This was one of the first books one of my early introductions to truth in a fictional way. It's called Illusions. Remember the book Illusions? The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah? We'll read a bit from that. It says, "The master answered and said, 'Once there lived a village of creatures along the bottom of a great crystal river. And the current of the river swept silently over them all, young and old, rich and poor, good and evil, the current going its own way, knowing only its own crystal self. Each creature in its own manner clung tightly to the twigs and the rocks of the river bottom, for clinging was their way of life, and resisting the current what each had learned from birth. But one creature said at last, 'I am tired of clinging. Though I cannot see it with my eyes, I trust that the current knows where it is going. I shall let go and let it take me where it will. Clinging, I shall die of boredom.' The other creatures laughed and said, 'Fool, let go, and that current you worship will throw you tumbled and smashed across the rocks, and you'll die quicker than boredom.' But the one heeded them not. And taking a breath, he did let go, and at once was tumbled and smashed by the current across the rocks. Yet in time, as the creature refused to cling again, the current lifted him free from the bottom, and he was bruised and hurt no more. And the creatures downstream, to whom he was a stranger, cried, "See, a miracle. A creature like ourselves, yet he flies. See the Messiah, come to save us all." We have it within us. It would seem to be the easiest thing of all to let go, because it takes no effort. It takes the removal of effort. Holding on, clinging, takes effort. Letting go is an act of surrender that is bolstered by faith. It's also bolstered by vision. You and I all have a vision of a freer life, of a life that's not constantly fettered by a mind that's incessantly telling us what's missing, broken, or not working. And who else is broken and not working for us? We would love to be free of that. And we have a vision of that because we were made in the image and likeness of that which is devoid of any of those thoughts. And yet we have fallen asleep to that aspect of our nature, and so that the work is like this, to not be a Klingon, in this story is to remember and to just invest a little bit of our willingness in this notion that we can let go of these stories that continually make me suffer. And yeah, I might get bumped and bruised a little bit along the way, because when you get vulnerable, sometimes you don't have those defenses in place. But then in time, having released those things, it's like releasing the ballast, from a hot air balloon. You may be afraid of flight, but if you are ever going to soar, if you're ever going to get into the stratosphere, into that rarefied air of spiritual understanding, it's going to be after we've let go of that which weighs us down. So only I can answer that for myself. What's holding me back? What's holding me down? What belief am I so invested in that it has me stuck in the bottom here, living this very challenging life at times? Course in Miracles says, think honestly what you have thought that God would not have thought, and what you have not thought that God would have you think. Search sincerely for what you have done and left undone accordingly, and then change your mind to think with God's. Rumi said, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. We don't seek for love. We do seek for love, and when we do so, we seek aimlessly and we seek without success. Because love, true love, the love that you and I want, the love that finally would give us that sense of fulfillment and peace of mind and wholeness and all is well and well-being, is not a love that could ever come from another person. It's only the love that could be activated in you and I. And that's why we remove the barriers. Because having removed the barriers, okay, we think he's the barrier, don't we, sometimes? She's the barrier. I mean, if they would just say it right, do it right. But there'll be someone else to take their place. That thought system is very good at identifying external reasons. So we got to give up the whole external idea, and maybe just one at a time. That's why sometimes we go through a lot of relationships. There's no laughter there. But we do. We go through those things because we think that they have something that we don't have inside of us. Course in Miracles says, removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is our natural inheritance. It's already ours. It's already given. It's mine, it's yours. So my growing edge in most of my life has been around believing that prosperity and success, having once achieved, would, then I would feel happy, and I would be peaceful, and I would feel whole. And so I was always in this sort of, no matter, even if I was in a spiritual community, which I was before I even got into ministry, there was always this little nagging voice that said, if you make it, you'll feel it inside. And I took that into ministry with me, which was really challenging. Because what I brought to the ministry was the need for the ministry to be a reflection of what I thought would define me as being successful. And so, that's a lot to lay on somebody or a community, right? So I'm not going to do that here. I actually came here, the first Sunday I came here, my ego was, the friendly little voice that I carry with me all the time. I'd really asked it to stay home, talk to it like, okay, we're making this trip, Denise and I are coming, and that voice of not enough, you stay home, don't need you here. But I don't know, it got in my luggage or something, and at the hotel, I crawled out in the middle of the night, I don't know. So as I was getting ready to come here that Sunday morning, after I'd done the workshop and all that on Saturday, and that seemed to go pretty well. And Sunday, I'm like, okay, well, this is the big deal, right? We're all going to be gathered in the room. We're all going to have a chance. And so there was this voice that said, you're really going to have to turn it up a major notch if you want to get this job, right? And as I was growing up and going through the teen years and everything, I was very self-conscious about my appearance and my hair and my body, and so all this stuff is living. What am I going to wear, and how am I going to look? And now that my hair has gone white, I don't worry too much about my hair anymore. But I still worry about other things, So I'm here, and I'm like, I know what I want to do here. What I want to do, the Spirit says, what you want to do is you want to be yourself. And there's a logical reason for that, and then there's a spiritual reason. So my ego mind always loves the logical approach. So, okay, what's the logical? The logical one is, if you show up as anybody other than yourself, how are you going to keep that going? Right? Have you ever done that? Go on a first date or a job interview or something, and you show up and you're just like amazing, and you have this bigger than life persona, and you look great, and you've got all this makeup on, and I don't wear that much, but some people do. And you're so well dressed, and your posture is abnormally erect and confident, and your gestures are perfect and everything. So I was thinking that's what the ego mind was saying, do that, Larry. That's what you need to do, because I really want to be here, and I want to be in this community, and it would be just so wonderful for me to minister to this community. But the still small voice, the one that doesn't offer you anything except one thing. Do you want to be connected to who you really are? Or do you want to have a really well-crafted mask and start your relationship there? I had to think about it a while. It wasn't an easy question. Because, see, we're not familiar enough, I'm not familiar enough with myself that's unmasked and completely as transparent as I can be to know that I'm okay with that person. And so I came here, and you just coaxed that person right out of me. I couldn't be anything other than myself. I just found myself just falling into that, here I am. And by showing up that way, I never felt so connected to myself, to my true self, to my God, to my spirit, to the person I came here to be, the person that I came into this lifetime to become connected to become familiar with. And the greatest gift that you can give somebody is to love them when they're in the process of taking off those layers of the false self and encouraging that subtraction process. Because Everything that we don't like about people is a layer. Don't you know? And everything that we love about people is that essential self. You know? It's that vulnerability, it's that innocence, it's that loving nature, it's that curiosity, it's that creativity. It's all those divine spiritual gifts that each one of us have that are often buried beneath some need to show up a certain way so that we'll be accepted. Just having it in our mind and having it been molded, not by the potter's hand, but by those who raised us and gave us messages that said, if you're this way, you're okay, and if you're that way, you're not. And we began to shape and make a new persona, a new way of showing our face to the world that convinced us that that would be the only face that we could show to the world where we could actually be successful. And we want to be successful, and we certainly want to be loved, and we certainly want to be accepted. So how can I possibly drop that? And the Spirit and its quiet assurance says, you can. Because everything that you create that is not lasting, that is not essentially who you are, must be jettisoned in the end anyway. It's got to become toast. That's why you came here, to jettison everything that's not you, to get rid of all of the baggage, rid of all of the false layers, so that you could come back to know yourself. So that's the journey. That is it. It's letting go, and it's sometimes we just do it a little bit at a time. You may just catch yourself. You may just catch yourself in a conversation with someone with a nervous laugh. You don't know what else to say. Or you might be overly kind to someone who you hate. Have you done that one? You see someone come and you go, oh, hi. Never done that, but I've seen you guys. Now, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. Oh, boy. When I come up to you the next time and go, hi. You don't have to ask me, is that veiled hatred? That's one thing about not having complete notes when you do a sermon. You end up saying things that you go, oh, you know, if this was a second service, I wouldn't use that example. So I'll get that chance coming up, right, when we get there. Okay, so let me just close with this. It's a little early, but we've got a nice little presentation from our YOU today, so we're going to allow time for that. So take this in. This is beautiful words from Paula D'Arcy. She wrote a book called A New Set of Eyes, Encountering the Hidden God. I read this passage this morning. I just love these words. See where it takes you. It's called Seeking with Empty Hands. It feels safe in my small world of conclusions and ideas. The physical belongings that surround me do not begin to reflect the size and breadth of thoughts and certainties that clutter my inner world and define my very vision. At any moment, God could be dancing in front of me, and I might look up quickly and say, not now, I'm praying. Don't interrupt my devotional time. The barriers are that formidable. I used to think that there was a formula or a set way to follow, but the inner journey seems to have no one course. Only this, that hands must be empty, heart must be seeking, treasured conclusions must be set aside. Beliefs are small in front of divine brightness. It doesn't matter what I hold to be true. All that matters is what is. Such emptiness the Spirit demands. So we are here today to acknowledge that there will be a continuous temptation to erect barriers that would in some way would want to convince us that it is the way to be successful in this life. But let us remember the teachings of the masters, all of whom invited us to release, to let go, and to open ourselves up to a vision of ourselves that is only apparent when we suspend our own, where we receive the gifts when our hands are open, our hearts are open, our willingness is there, it's intentional, and it's focused on knowing the truth more than any story that we would recycle again. And so we thank you, Spirit, that you are steadfast in being the reminder to us. And we offer our willingness this week to listen and to release everything that is unlike the wholeness, the truth of our being. Our hearts and our minds open to receive your vision, your version of ourselves as you created us to be. May we know that we still remain that, and may we know and feel and trust and surrender into that with every breath, with every moment of awareness. And as we do this, we know that we shall rise up. It is a law of love that anything that blocks love, having been removed, will reveal more love. And so it is. Amen.